Welcome back, everyone, to the We're Talking to You conversation. Today's a little different because this is actually my very first conversation with these gentlemen. And if you've been following for a long time, you know that means one thing. The cream mix has officially arrived. For those who don't know me, I'm Lucretia, and today I'm joining Jay Dominique and Prometheus for what I hope is the first of many thought-provoking conversations. Now, before we get into today's topic, I want to give these gentlemen a chance to introduce themselves, tell the audience who they are, what they're about, and what perspective they bring to the table. Jay, let's start with you.
Greetings, beautiful people. My name is Jay Dominique, aka J Dot, the one that brings food for thought to the haves and the have-nots at your service.
And I'm the resident old head, the Titan god of forethought, the legendary champion of humanity, the one who stole fire from the gods, defying Zeus and giving it to you, the people.
Now that that's out of the way, I have to say, for my first conversation with the Cream Mix crew, we picked a topic that we know everyone has an opinion on: marriage. Love it or hate it. But the question I really want to wrestle with today is, has the concept of marriage changed or have the people changed? Every generation seems to have a different relationship with marriage, right? Some see it as the ultimate commitment, others see it as an outdated institution, and some are chasing it while others actively avoid it. So let's start here. When you think about marriage today compared to 20, 30, or 50 years ago, what do you think's changed the most? The institution itself or the people participating in it? JJ, let's start with you.
Okay. So if I think about it, my honest answer is that I think that it's the people that have changed. For all intents and purposes, the foundation and institution of marriage has held the same, and it originates from a biblical context. But like in any society, things change with each generation. And so I've had the privilege of being on planet Earth for 50 years. And so it has definitely changed from when I was a boy and was first introduced to the concept to when I was a young man and kind of thought about and played around with the idea to when I actually decided to jump the broom myself and where I'm at now thinking about possibly doing it again. If I was to really think about what has changed the most, is the question is whether or not marriage is actually a necessity, or does it really hold reverence in the hearts and the minds of people nowadays. When I think about my introduction to marriage, it was supposed to be this finality. It's this thing that culminating and is at the pinnacle of what you need in order to have a complete life. And being trained to find a woman was an art, and being able to keep a woman and to be able to uplift her and decide that you wanted to spend the rest of your life with her was a serious thing. It was a commitment that you had to really, really be sure that that's what you wanted to do before you jumped into it. I'm not so sure that that's the mindset that most males have these days. And I'm not yet prepared to say why I think it has changed. But what I do feel is true is that when you talk to people these days about the institution of marriage, it doesn't have the same reverence that it had to individuals that came up with a Judeo-Christian background or came up in a religious context, right? We're moving and migrating away from that as a society. And I think that that has a little bit to do to why the mindset is shifted. What says you, Pro?
So I think the concept of marriage hasn't changed, but the people have. I think marriage, going back to the most earliest conception of marriage, was never about love, it was never about romance, it was never about religion, it was about property and inheritance and protection. And I think at the core of marriage in 2015, whenever you get married, there's still an element of protection and compatibility that goes into it. I think what's changed is people, what we're looking for, what we need. And I guess as we walk through this a little bit more, we'll actually break this down a little bit more and understand how the changing of the times puts a different requirement on what were the expectations of the participants in marriage. I don't think the institution or concept of marriage has changed in so much as that the people have changed.
How does the people changing not actually change the institution of it? So it's created by people and it's followed by people, just like anything else. Once the people change, then they change what defines it and what the institution is.
I would say, simplistically speaking, marriage has always been about pair bonding, because long before you went before a justice of the peace, whoever, You went before you and you decided that you were going to cohabitate with somebody for something. And generally speaking, in the most basic of human terms, it was probably to raise kids or raise children, raise offspring, to ensure that the next generation could carry on. And then as property came into it, it was a way to protect inheritance and protect property rights. And then I think the notion of romance came into marriage within the last, I'd say, 150 years with respect to the Victorian age of how we look at modern courtship, right? Dating and the chastity of womanhood, right? Prior to that, I think if you had an arranged marriage, what's probably what happened, if you live with somebody long enough, you're going to begin to love them. You're going to have feelings for them. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean going into this marriage, two people loved each other. In some cultures, they didn't even know each other till maybe a week before. That's why there was like
Stockholm syndrome.
it could be that, but if you stay with somebody long enough, eventually you're going to feel a connection. I don't make the rules on that. That's just the way human beings generally are.
If the word is Stockholm syndrome, that's the one you're looking for.
I don't. I'm
Messing with you.
gonna say, human beings pair bond. That's just what they do.
Yeah.
And if you're around somebody long enough under any circumstances, you're going to form a kinship to them.
Therefore, institution changing.
I have to disagree on that. I understand where you're coming from with it, but let's consider this perspective. The question is, how can the institution stay intact if people are changing, and i.e., people are the ones that come up with the social constructs and the institutions? When this first product is created, regardless of when it was created and in what society, is something that the vast majority of the people in power decide this is going to be the status quo. And so everyone else is, if not forced, they're strongly suggested to stay within the confines of whatever that agreement is, right? And so if a marriage is a covenant, right, and it's also a business transaction and all those other things, but there's a standard that's attached in each society to what types of things have to take place in a marriage. And so what we can see as evidence is for people that don't feel like they can live up to, or they don't have the desire to live up to those precepts that are already spelled out for you in a status quo type of society, they decide, A, I'm not going to get married because I don't want to be confined or defined by those set of principles and those ideas. Or they'll try to kind of like shape it and move it around and knead it into something that they feel is more malleable for them and more digestible. But the bulk of the people that are still subscribing to that ideal are still going to call them outliers. They're still going to say, well, you're either perverting the original intent or you're just not married at all. You're doing something totally different. And so what we see in societies, we have what we know to be a common law types of marriages where people don't actually get married and have their certificate. But to go back to what Pro is saying, as it relates to all business transactions and everything that has to do with property, like they're falling under the ideal of what that society's marital practices and the things that go into that. So if I were to say that people change the institutions, I think that only happens when enough people decide that we're going to make actual amendments. We're going to declare that to be these new adjustments in our new norm. And then more, even if it's just 51% of the population that say this is how we've amended it. And this is what we now know to be the new way of looking at our marriage covenant. But even with that, I seldom have I came across a society that absolutely turned their ideal of marriage upside down, and everyone else just said, okay, from here forward, we're going to do it this way. Usually you just allow for some fringe activity for some people that just want to have it their way, and then some people to say, nope, I don't want to participate in it at all. But the bulk of the people still subscribe to that ideal that was created. So that to me stays a little bit more static.
Meaning that the institution
Question:
stays the same, the people are changing.
Yeah.
When you say marriage is a covenant unto what?
So I think that
covenant
it's
to each
important.
other, or a covenant between them and their God?
So I think in most societies that have a marriage type of institution in place in their society, it does extend from a higher power or from some sort of religious ideologies. I don't know if there's an indigenous culture that came up with something that was totally different than ours, but it hasn't reached and influenced people on a grand scale. So if you think of all the hubs of civilization where people can travel from one place to another, there were these concepts of marriage that still said that a man and woman stands before God, whether they didn't see each other until the day of the marriage or they got an opportunity to choose and go through the whole courtship and go through being a fiance and all that stuff. I think that for most people, even when you have a justice of the peace, most of the time you're saying outwardly, we are standing before someone that is ordained or is of authority to be able to deliver this to a higher power as our covenant, right?
Okay.
You touched on something that I kind of wanted to go down a little further where you said, and it was a cup, I think it was a maybe when you were asked answering the first question, but you said something in it along the lines of we no longer need it, or do we no longer need it? Do you remember saying that when we talked about whether or not the institution is changing or the people were changing? You said people were not subscribing to it because they don't feel like they need it.
That's you.
As I'm thinking about it, some feel like they don't need to subscribe to the thing,
Mhm.
but they still want to participate and to structure their life in accordance with the thing.
You mean like that's what the common law? That's what you mentioned with the common law.
Common law, or the couple that's been together 17 years and somebody doesn't want to pop the question for whatever reason, they still in their daily interactions probably structure their relationship in accordance with and at least paralleling some of the paramount traditions and ideologies of what it's like to get married, right? There still is a head of household. There's still someone or both that have to come to the conclusion of how they're going to live their life together and share in all of these things that life can bring you, but then still at the same time have some sort of structure. I don't know if that structure has been peeled away from the ecclesiastical sense of being in a church to the point where you can say, no, there's two different kinds of marriage. There's a kind of marriage if you believe in God and you believe in the church tenets, but then there's this secular marriage where you do something totally different. I think that people just don't want to attach it or ascribe it to a higher power, but they're still going through and structuring their interactions in their household the same way. And that's why I feel like some people in their mind are like, I just don't want to do it and name it by the name that traditionally has been a marriage that has to do with a religious ideology. We want to do it differently and however we want to, because we don't feel like we need to get permission from a higher power. We don't think that we need for someone to tell us how we should structure our interactions. But I still question whether or not they still don't do it and just try and call it by a different name.
But I would say then we would agree one of the core tenets of marriage is about sharing it, right? The ability to share your life with somebody else on a more definite plane than just people existing, right? Because obviously, if your marriage, whether you say God is at the center of your marriage, or whether justice and the peace, or if you just pair bonded because you're from a society where you all just said, "Hey, we're going to live together and raise a family together," it's about sharing. It's about recognizing that we want to separate ourselves from the rest of it, and then I make a pledge, if you will, or there's some sort of understanding that now we're gonna do certain things for each other that separates our relationship from just a regular old relationship, right?
Mhm.
Is that safe to say? No, I'm just trying to figure out what Jay was going with that.
Mm.
Because I still think that marriage is about sharing. It's about, what did I say, pair bonding. But that's at the most primitive level about who stands in front of your marriage, who you sign over to. Those are things that the state provides that says, okay, if you say I do to somebody, you have legal protections here. And those are going to vary throughout the world depending on the system and the part of the world you're at. And
Mm.
what the concept of marriage in and of itself, long before we had the word marriage, was some people saying, hey, I think we should get together on a more permanent basis and set some rules how we want to govern ourselves. And
Yeah.
usually it was implied by doing this, we were probably also going to have some children, or we were going to have something that is now ours that we build and invest in together.
But that's a chicken versus the egg kind of analysis, right? So at some point, there's a decision made that there has to be something in place for others within our community to honor, or else everyone is chasing after everyone else and there's no structure. And you can not say, hey, you know what, I lay claim to this. In the same way that land distribution was created, right? In the beginning, land, there was no concept of land. It was just everyone just moved around and we lived in this ecosystem, right? But then you start to come into agreements, social constructs, right? Social contracts. And marriage, I think, probably originated out of the need of setting a social contract up so that everyone in the community understood that there were going to be some boundaries and some guidelines and some things to keep people from warring against each other and from having total chaos, right? And so as I'm listening to you speak, bro, you're making some great points from my perspective. I mean, I'm asking myself, maybe even just rhetorically, like, was the institution of marriage thought of, conceptualized, and put into practice as a safeguard for that pair bonding that you're talking about? Or was it more natural where you just see a bunch of guys taking girls by the arm and it's like, hey, I want to be with her and you want to be with her. So, okay, they're off limits and we're off limits and we just roll.
I think I'm going to say somewhere what we call the Middle Ages, looking post 1200 AD sense of the word, marriage was about protecting legacy and passing in titles, land ownership, and other things that come with that. That's why when you started getting into like Eastern cultures, the concept of marriage did not exist, but it didn't exist the way the Westerners saw it. It was more about the community. Things worked better when the community had a sense of order. And more often than not, if it takes roughly like a human baby's born, it takes at least 2 to 5 years before that baby can even be productive and functional in society, which means more often than not, the mother is going to be the one raising it primarily. Somebody still has to go feed everybody. So then that's where I guess the traditional role or the concept, in my opinion, of the traditional role comes in. But bring it back to what you were saying about what marriage is today, I think the people have changed, but the institution ultimately it's about pair bonding. Now, as far as what marriage looks like in terms of the rules and the roles and who does what, I think those are a lot more fluid in today's times than it was maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago because we have access to information. Women are educated, if not more, as equal to men. It's not always because what was it in America? A woman still needed her brother or her father to get a checking account up until about 1975-ish, unless she came from like real money. And it was like in the 80s before a woman could buy her own house without having a male co-sign for her. So some of that still went on. So it's say like my mother and father grew up in a world where being a single woman, not dangerous in the fact that somebody could harm you, it was dangerous because you couldn't do anything.
Since we've already covered like the hierarchy of it, why it started, what it really was, the institution of it, the people, whether or not the people are changing, let's talk about marriage today. Let's bring it a little bit down to earth let's talk about people today and what they're dealing with in marriage today. And we can even go as far as because we could really, really dig into it because marriage does not look today like it looked 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago. What we're taught and passed down generation to generation is what I believe continuously changes. So, we come from a generation where you're still, and just the generation previous to our generation was you get old enough, you get married, you have kids. That was just the goal. There was no other goal. There was no sense of self for women. There was just you stay in my house and then you leave my house to take a husband and you go live in his house and then you have the kids and then he brings home the bacon, so to speak, and not look the same anymore. The whole idea of it even from the time that I was younger to where I am today, it doesn't even look or sound the same in the promotion of it. doesn't seem to look or sound the same.
Why do you think, just in your own view, that the promotion of it isn't the same?
I think that women have gotten, like you said, more educated. The women start to enter the workforce. The women start to be looked at as more equal. And then the women still were doing the thing, which was get married, right? Now I'm educated. Now I have a job and I have a child, and now I'm going to get married. And so now when I go get married, I've been taught this idea of what marriage is supposed to look like, but they forgot to tell you that you also, since you're now educated and you have a job, you're still supposed to do the marriage thing, the kid thing, the mom, the mom thing, the wife thing. You got to do all the things now. So then you start to promote it differently. You know what I mean? So then when you look at yourself and all the things you had to go through when you were married because no one promoted it that way to you, then you start to promote it to your children a little differently. And then you're like, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Worry about you first. Do you first. Even my dad was promoting it to me when I was a little bit younger differently than my mom would promote it to me. My dad was like, go finish college first, get a career, and then do all those other things.
And I think you touched on something, and I think that this is where I think sometimes in the Black community we are kind of at a deficit, because although things are changing, like my mother and father were married. I knew they were married because I seen the photo album, but I don't ever remember my dad coming home to my mother. So I grew up in a space where I got to live with both parents on separate terms, but I wasn't taught what a husband looked like. I had to learn the role of a husband from from a fantasy, what I thought one would do. Because obviously my mother did the best she could raising me, but she didn't teach me how to date women. She taught me how to be a gentleman. But the nuances of that is that there's a time and a place to be an asshole in a relationship. But if you're never taught that or shown that, then you're probably going to you're going to get taken advantage of in your early dating. And that's going to be origin of your villain story, right?
Yeah.
Very interesting perspective. And as I'm listening to you two kind of like unpack it a little bit from your perspective, I was thinking, how did I come into the concept of what I believe marriage to be?
Yeah.
And I think that, marriage is been packaged up in the ideal sense.
Yeah.
And so you either get it from the social cues that you see throughout society. You watch the movies, they promote what they feel a marriage should look like. You get a little bit of it from people that are in your own inner circle, your orbit, that you can physically see them. You can look at the eyeball test like Pro's talking about with his grandparents. You can see either the application of marriage or the avoidance of it, and you have to make up your mind. And I was thinking I didn't have a good role model or anyone that was engaged in what people would consider to be a healthy marriage, yet I still held on to those high ideal values of what a marriage should be like, just based on just looking at what Western society says a marriage should be. A man should ask for permission to take a woman's hand in marriage. A man should stand before God and pledge that he's going to do whatever he says in his vows, and expects, his partner to do whatever she says in her vows. And when you get done with that and you start day number 1 of marriage 101 with your new spouse, then it's like, oh shit,
Now,
that part is
right.
not spelled out.
Now what do you do? Right.
Right.
Now that we're
Yeah.
here, what do we do now? Like,
Yeah.
no one teaches you how to sustain a marriage. How do you continuously promote something but teach no one how to do it?
Now you got to learn how to live with a person that you can't kick out when you're mad at them.
Yeah.
You locked in. You really, really locked in. You really are.
Yeah.
And then women, it's weird. We are just like, and I think I've mentioned this before too. They're just like, get married, find a husband. You need a man, get you a man. You know what I'm saying? Get married, find a husband, get you a man, get you a man. And then you get this man, and then you're just like,
is that still pushed on women, you think, in your opinion?
Yeah, but
generationally speaking, like not your generation, but like maybe one under you, maybe. So anybody who's about 35-ish right now, do you think they're still getting taught that?
I think the newer generation is deciding. They're deciding on their own. They're deciding because, first of all, there's Gen X, then there's the millennials, and the millennials are definitely later to everything. They did not
Well-
get married in their 20s. Millennials did not get married until later and didn't have kids until their late 30s or even 40s sometimes. So I think that Gen X is, I'm kind of on the cusp of Gen X and millennial. They're teaching our Gen Z daughters to do whatever it is that they want to do. My mom never talked about it getting married so much. My dad talked about education, but somewhere I was fed it, right?
I could say like I definitely wasn't raised to be a husband. Like I don't really remember any conversations being taught what like as a husband you will do this and that. I think both my parents, because they married so young, were unified, even though they didn't live together, and telling me you need to like wait, whatever that meant, right? I always knew I wanted to be married because I know this isn't. Hey, so you said something. I'm going to ask you a question. I'll pivot back. But the first thing I want to say, do you think people are waiting in this generation about marriage because of the costs associated with it? Because it's just expensive, right? But that being said, but for me,
I
I'm going
think
to put
people are
this out
poorer
there.
into themselves more. Their women do not need a man to protect them. They do not need a man to co-sign. They don't need a man for a bank account. You don't need that to get the thing that you want. You have to want it now, not need it. And I think that's the difference. I personally think that's the difference.
For me, that makes sense. But like, I knew I would be married one day just because I knew I had a very healthy single life. There's not anything out there that I didn't try that I wanted to try.
I'm
Right.
sorry. What was that face? That face.
I'm gonna just mind my business right now.
Right.
Don't mind me.
But I also knew that eventually, but I also knew at 25, I didn't want to be 55, 60, still chasing women. That
Okay.
didn't sound like a plan for me. It didn't
You want to
sound
be
like,
the
'cause
old guy at the club on Friday
no,
night?
no, no, no. I remember telling these heathens, I said, if you ever see me out with a bunch of kids, my children's age, trying to shut the party down, looking for the next thrill, now I need to take my ass home. Now that doesn't mean marriage is traditional. We went on somebody's altar, we pledge a life, we wear rings, and now we change last names, none of that shit. But in terms of pair bonding, I knew for myself, even in my 20s, that this shit was going to get old.
Mm.
And
I don't think women think that way anymore.
I think that's dope. But I just like, for me, I think that's another part of the conversation we don't always talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go a little bit off topic and come back to marriage.
But before you go off topic, let's see what Jay got to say about all this.
You guys are helping to for me to reintroduce myself to my conservative roots. Like I feel like most issues sit just left of center. But as we're talking about it in my mind, I'm starting to think like, but why does it have to be this way? Or what has happened that has moved the needle this far to the left? And of course, I can acknowledge that if people are reducing marriage down to a certificate that's like a bill of sales that has to do with financial this and property, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
that, and doesn't take the human element into consideration, then I can see how in today's modern society that just doesn't fit, because
Right.
now most people have equal access
Right.
to certain things. But I can't help but thinking, what happened to this ideal that there's someone out here on planet Earth that is handcrafted and constructed just for me?
We don't subscribe to
And
fairy
what it
tales. Women stop being the princess and start being the heroes of their own story.
I don't even
and
subscribe.
I get that, but here's my pushback on the fairy tale analogy.
Because there's more than one person out there for you.
I'm not saying that there has to be a perfection in this story of marriage. I think that feeling like you don't have someone that can actually register with you on that frequency, so much so that you're like, you know what? There's something undeniable between us that's like, you know what? I want to take this shot. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be pretty, And it may not even be what we imagined when we were kids coming up, but I'm willing to take this chance on you because I want to spend this life with just you. And there's no other way there's no higher form of expression of that to the people around you than to be like, no, this is me right here. Like, it ain't got to be the biggest ring. It ain't got to be the bells and whistles. We don't got to go and have a destination wedding. It doesn't have to be all those things that have commercialized marriage. But I'm saying I still think that there's something bold as hell to be able to say, I'm going to declare that this woman is mine.
That's
And she
cute.
say, I'm gonna declare that this man is mine.
That's cute.
And we're gonna figure this thing out. And I feel like people are running from that the moment that they realize the truth. Any human interaction is going to come with a little bit of turbidity, a little bit of turbulence, a lot of I have to learn where my place is in this relationship. Friendships, courtships, family relationships, any kind of relationships, you still have to go through the grind of figuring out how to show up and how to coexist with that person. But I think that it's now becoming more of a cop out to be like, nah, I don't even want to go through all that stuff. It's too rigid for me. I don't have to do that. What happens when you get off work? What happens after you've had the meal? What happens after you're done with whatever stimuli you've had that day? And now it's time before you get ready to turn into your slumber to be able to say, but am I doing this alone or am I sharing this experience with somebody? I think
I'm
that
so glad we're going down this road, Jay, because let's
yeah.
just be clear.
You
Mhm.
married
Let's
to that
talk
though?
about it then. If we want to talk, let's be very, very clear about that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Here's the thing. Because let's really talk about it. If we're gonna talk about, let's talk about it. Because what you're saying, it sounds adorable, but there is something about a woman who has found peace within herself that does not require turn to anyone at the end of the day and be like, I had someone to share this with. Say, for instance, I have a crazy day. I get up, I'm with the kids. We're getting ready for school. I'm taking them to school. I come home, I work all day. I get off work. I got to prepare dinner for the kids. Now they're getting a little bit older. I don't necessarily have to prepare dinner for them anymore. They over there gourmeting their own stuff up. Prepare meal, we eat together. I go, I take my shower, I get in the bed, I go to open a book, and I'm chilling, and it is peaceful. You know what's not happening in my brain? I wonder if my man is okay. I wonder how his day went. I wonder if he ate. I wonder what he has to have for lunch. I wonder him. We naturally will put everyone in front of us. So I want to go to one of the things that you actually posted on your Facebook page. I really want to talk about that. What naturally happens for women, what we consider peace, is something different now than what I think people thought that women would want to be experiencing. If I don't have to think about what I need to do for this person, that means I have more energy to put back into me. And we're naturally going to put people first and hold people up. We don't want to do it.
Is that maturity of age or maturation in age?
I think women are recognizing it earlier because at what point in time when you're 20, you're a 20-year-old woman, who are you dating? 20-year-old men. What are 20-year-old men doing?
Fucking
Who? You and who else?
whoever they can get access to.
And then whose heart's being broken? And then who are we still concerned about? The man.
Let me ask you
right?
I don't know about part, but this is what I wanted to say before we had pivoted real quick. That
Okay.
when you get to be older as a man, you recognize what a lot of young men are looking for when they're out there touring and chasing around in the world is intimacy, non-sexual. But we're not taught 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 how to express that.
Your hormones are going crazy.
No, but how that gets masked is that through sexual conquest and sexual contact. So what I'm getting at is when you see a hypersexual man, almost always that man is broken or not broken, because somebody would get in the comments, I wasn't broken. That is a man in crisis. Like now,
It seems like a lot of y'all in crisis and the 20s.
Exactly.
And some feel like that to me. Okay, I'm just saying.
And some men don't even grow up. Some men don't ever outgrow that. But when you see a 25, a 15 to 25-year-old man, 15 to 25, he's got his hormones running wild. But when he's very promiscuous, almost to the point of being reckless, I see that now at my age, that young brother's a cry for help.
So he just fucking a whole bunch of girls because he's in pain?
No,
Because it doesn't
no.
feel like that. It's because he's in pain? Is that what you're
He wants,
saying?
he wants to feel something. We're not taught how to express feeling.
Mhm.
That's an instant gratification. Yes,
Oh,
there's the hormone aspect behind that, which is why I taught my sons different than I was taught about
okay.
that and sexual
I've
expression
never
and being
heard
able.
that perspective before. That's interesting perspective because I think at the
So,
end of the day, we're tired of that. The women are every
Mhm.
generation becomes a little smarter. So to get back to what Jay was saying with the why is it that not anymore? It's your idea, I believe, of what it should be comes from a very mature place. Your idea of what someone would want, it comes from a very mature place. It comes from a lived life kind of a space. But the women nowadays, they're just like, I've already either they've been through that, like I have, right? I've been through the man who's been promiscuous and the infidelity. If I had to choose, I'm going to choose me in the not being concerned about him. And I know that my peace is still with me. And I think people do truly start to understand what marriage really means. We didn't, right? We didn't know. We didn't know what it was. We just knew we were supposed to be
Wait,
doing. We did it, and they were like, "What the fuck is this? How did you last 50 years? Like, how did you do that?" But now they're like, "I can see that, and I don't know why I would choose that yet because I don't know how to do that. I don't want to do that, and I'm going to avoid that." The companionship piece is so easy to get without having to do it. And I think you were going to touch on that too earlier, like the companionship. When you said, do you have to be married to even get that? To get the companionship, do you have to
No,
do that?
I don't.
You could just do a will. I could just put you in a will, and then you don't have to go in probate. You can have the house if you're here.
but
Yeah,
being in the profession I'm in, being around Gen Zers, being around Gen Alpha, if I'm to simplify what changes marriage, or what's the difference between marriage and cohabitation, I think that many people, I won't say most or all, I think most people, the thing that comes to mind is the level of commitment. And so, as you eloquently pointed out, Lou, that this day and age, there are people that are smarter and have access to more things and all that, yada, yada, yada. But what I also know is that there is such a culture of instant gratification, and I want it now. I need it to be perfect now, and I need it in the next 15 minutes, or else it never existed. And we're moving on to the new next thing. I think that people are more out of step with a concept of commitment. Like,
mhm,
you don't have to commit in this day and age. And that's a foundational piece in a marriage. What a person that decides to stay and cohabitate with somebody for 17 years and not getting married is saying no matter what their rationale or the reasoning why they're telling the male or female why they don't have to subscribe to this social construct of marriage,
mhm,
I think somewhere at the core is the commitment and the finality of it. When people get married, they understand the expectation of their partner is that we're gonna ride this thing out. We're gonna figure it out. We're gonna do what we have to do. And we can argue, and pull teeth whether or not people vet each other in this day and age to the degree that we probably should. But going back to what we said, there's this whole romancing of what it takes to get married. Then you get married, and then it's like, oh shit, what's next?
right,
That piece rattles
right,
couples. That piece rattles people. But I think about when I turn on TV or I access human interactions, whether it's on TV or it's just people watching or whether it's on social media. And it's mostly guys that's like, hey, we don't need no piece of paper to define our love. We don't have to get
that's what the
married.
men say. Yeah,
Yeah.
women,
I always think, and I'm like, what is that you're ducking is the
it's the
accountability for the
accountability.
thing that
Yeah,
you may or may not do.
right,
And so there still is enough ironclad understanding that if you get married to somebody and it goes through the whole mechanism of get married and it's official, there is an expectation that immediately is placed on you that you got to do right by that person and they got to do right by you. But in this microwave society, right, everything else is let me just sit with it for 5, 10, 15 minutes. Then I'm going to do something else. And I'm going to go and I'm going to tell everybody else, hey, I have a short attention span. That's my rationale behind it. So now I have a justification as to why I don't have to work at this thing called commitment. Marriage is a commitment,
Agreed.
right? And so as I'm listening to you all lay out very eloquently all these reasons why people have changed, and maybe the institution is static and it's stuffy and it's not palatable for them, it's because just like every other aspect of our modern society, people are being and given passes to not have to stand 10 toes down on anything. Like you could pivot from anything.
Yeah.
And so if we're talking about relationships, I agree. If you're with the wrong person, it doesn't matter if you're married or not. Like that's just a hellacious experience you're having. But let's just, for the benefit of the doubt, let's not assume that marriage means that you're stuck in this trap with somebody that you misjudged and miscalculated, and you expected things of them that they can never fulfill for you. But you signed a piece of paper, and now you guys took a deed out to a mortgage. You guys got houses. You guys got things that are overlap. Your family say you're so cute together. You get on Instagram, you take pictures, and everybody think you got the perfect little wedding and the perfect little marriage. And so now you got to cave into the pressure of staying with somebody that you absolutely are not going to grow with, and you might even begin to loathe them and the decisions that you made. Those things happen, but let's just say that not everybody has that experience if they realize that marriage is an agreement to work together for a lifetime,
Yeah.
towards a lifetime of togetherness and commitment. I think there's nothing else that you can give someone that is as high on the ideal scale as your level of commitment to them.
I agree.
Everybody else can bail. Everyone else in their life can bail.
I
And when you
agree.
have kids, your kids at some point, once they're ready, should be bailing and going out and starting their life.
Yeah.
But here's this one person that you're saying, I don't have an option to bail from you if we do this thing right. And again, the right thing doesn't mean it's perfect, doesn't mean that there's not little patches in between where you got to work through some stuff. But I really think that the thing that stays constant, that people diverge from, but it stays static in their marriage, is the level of social, emotional commitment and legal commitment that you're embarking on with someone else. And I don't think that that's ideal. I think that is just hard for a lot of people to swallow
People are
because it
good.
takes a lot of work.
They're
It
good for
takes a lot of
better.
work.
They're not good for worse. They're good for
No.
the health, but they're not good with the sickness. They're good with the
I-
richer. They're not good with the poorer.
I think that's the human conditioning. I think, Jay, you said something, so I'm just going to push the conversation a little bit. Does a marriage have to be two people if people are in like polycules? I'm saying what it's for you.
Did you say poly?
Polycule, yeah, poly.
A bit of
Or
the,
polyandry. Let's just so I said polycule.
I think when those things were born out of necessity, meaning a man was responsible for access to the world for women, like you guys were talking about, where women were second class citizens in society and could not do these things on their own. And that woman's husband died and left her with children. And the necessity was, okay, now the man's brother, or however the society is structured, how polygamy was going to be applied. My introduction to polygamy was more out of necessity for being able to stay within the confines of the social fabric of that society. To where it's like, hey, I just want to have 2, 3, 4 women. I'm thinking, I'll name drops. I'm thinking the Neos. I'm thinking
It's got money though.
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
out.
I'm thinking
We ain't gonna talk
the
about that.
Nick
I ain't doing
Cannon.
none of that.
I'm saying for those individuals that have actually came out and allowed the world and social media to publicly understand that they decide they want to have more than one woman just because they can, right? I don't think that that is in alignment with the intended construct of a marriage. Like I said, my introduction to polygamy was out of necessity in societies where women's husbands died and they didn't have access without the husband, the same way you guys are talking about. There's always outliers. There's always people that's going to blaze their own trails. They're going to create their own thing, and then they'll probably have a little following. But we've all been to the beach, and we all know that a wave comes and a wave goes.
Right.
And so I think that when I'm thinking of marriage, I think that marriage is the ocean. It's not the wave.
Okay.
And so I think polygamy is a wave in the ocean. And so some people like to jump on the big waves and wipe out and jump up and clear their sinuses and wait for it again. But some people are like, nah, I'm gonna be smart. I'm gonna go ahead and hold on to this floaty and I'm gonna just ride on these waves and I'm gonna have a good time with it. So to me, there's so many ways you can cut and slice marriage based on the society we're talking about. But we live in a Western society. So I'm just gonna come from a framework of Western ideal society. And marriage is structured as one person creating a covenant with another person. But I just think that in this day and age, people are not being socialized to value accountability, personal accountability. When personal accountability is not a guiding light in your life, it's easy to be like, hey, I could do everything else except for commit to a person. But that's just my 2 cents.
Makes sense.
I don't got nothing to say about polygamy. No, that's gonna be a no for me.
Well, I wasn't
What?
gonna say. What about polyandry?
Ooh, there was one time. I used to have this thing. It was like, make sure the man that you're with is funny. Make sure the man that you're with is a provider. Make sure the man that you're with is loving and caring, or make sure he's a great communicator. And finally, make sure none of these 4 men meet.
I heard that before. My sister said that before.
To be truly honest, I mean, it sounds awesome, but at the end of the day, it's just a lot of things floating around in the air for me. I just, I don't even want to be handling all that extra. I just, just one meat and two for me.
You two are wild.
That's good enough for me. I don't know.
You two are wild.
People want all the extra stuff. I'm just like, bro, let me just. I'm cool. I don't have the energy.
I like what you said, though, Jay, about the accountability piece, personal accountability. I do think that is a thing that's lacking in all facets of society today, not just marriage.
Yeah.
But I think marriage or relationships, the rules, when we're talking about free choosing adults, I think it should be predicated on what they agree the rules are. Like for me, if there's an expectation that I have to meet certain goals, then I have an expectation that we have certain titles. Now, if we just all hanging out, living our lives the best, and we connect when we connect, and we do what we do when we do it, and we have the freedom to exist over here and over here, I have no problem with that. I've been fortunate enough in my life to have been cheated on, cheated, and been the side dude. So I understand all 3 unique roles in that. And I've played my position well, I think, in all of those.
Which one do you like the best?
I like the transparency role. I need to know where I stand. At this age, I don't have that in me. I don't have that kind of energy in me.
The transparency.
But if I were to be with someone and we were transparent enough to say, hey, listen, I'm not looking for something serious, but we connect when we connect. Oh, and by the way, since we don't live in the same geographical location, I got a friend I see. I don't give a shit. I need to understand where we're at. But if you expect to get certain rules up off of me, certain roles up off of me, then we need to have certain, like, I'm not the type that can pay majority of certain bills and then I'm sharing.
I remember this guy told me one time, I said, do you want to be number 1 or you want to be number 2? And he said he never wanted to be number 2. And I said, why? He said, because number 2 knows everything and number 1 doesn't know anything.
Yes, number 2 always knows everything.
I want to be number 2. I was like, well, sure, okay. You got it. Wish granted. We talked about what we think about the institution of marriage, where it's come from, the background of it, where we are today, what it is, and how we feel about it. Well, I don't think we've all talked about really how we feel about it. Who do you think it benefits more, the men or the women?
I'll bat first. I think in today's Western society, I think that it benefits the man more than it benefits the woman, because there was a certain access point that women didn't have, that being married was able to provide for them. And in this day and age, a woman can go out and sustain a good and comfortable life for herself and doesn't need a man for that. But I still think that when we look at how a man profits from being in a marriage, it's that society still tends to see that man first. You see the man and then you see his wife. Unless you're a popular figure, if you're someone that's a celebrity or that's out there, then it might be reversed. But even that is few and far between. You know, when you're walking into a mall, you're walking into a Walmart, you're walking into a place, I think that we're still conditioned when we see a couple to say, hey, you know what? That's the man. I want to make sure I'm respectful of the man and his lady, whether it's his wife, his girlfriend, fiance, XYZ. So the man still gets the focal point in society. It's like, this is me and my girl. This is me and my fiance. This is me and my wife. Right. And then when we talk about growing out of that malehood type of constraint of just being led by the biology and led by your hormones and all that stuff, and you start to look at accumulating some things, a man wants and desires to have easy and instant access to a woman and not have to do what Pro said and remarked about having to go out and play the games and go through all the social posturing just to have a lady. So a man benefits from having what we used to call in-house, right? Yeah. And I have that intact to be able to go out and pursue anything that you want outside of your structure, your house, out in the real world, and then be able to come back and already have that part in place is a benefit. Now, here's the thing. I don't know it to be true because I haven't been moving around in the dating game for a vast majority of my adult life. But if women aren't being prepared for those traditional roles as a wife, then there has to be some women that aren't really being groomed to be able to cook and do all the docile work that they were expected to do from little girls to prepare them to be someone's wife. So I don't know if most men these days are coming across women and most of the women still know how to cook a steak. Back in the days, the woman had to be able to cook a good steak. Yeah. And so I'm not so sure because I'm out of that loop, but based on my observations and just hearing people, if a guy has a woman that still knows how to cook, that definitely is a plus. I got somebody that's going to feed me when I get to the house. I got somebody that is going to fulfill my needs when I come back in from this cruel world that I'm out navigating through all day. And then I have the social clout and I have the respect, even if it's just genuine and basic respect from most people I come across when they see me out with my lady, be like, hey, you know what? That's a man and his wife. So we still have some of those things embedded even in this new age way of looking at things, right? So I do definitely feel like the guy benefits so much more than a woman, because then we could also talk about this from your perspective, and you've alluded to it a couple of times and gave a couple of brief descriptions, but sometimes guys aren't doing their part as the dude in the marriage and the woman is expected to do more. So there's that imbalance there.
I would say, I think, just from my judgmental sector in the world, I think men do better in marriage the older they get, because the men I know who are in their 50s and not married, they're like fucking Peter Pan's lost. Those are the boys. Those are men who have never grown the fuck up, and it's one thing to see a bunch of guys on a fellas trip. Oh, hey, yeah, but it's another thing where you have guys who are like in their 50s and they still talk and conduct themselves, in my opinion, like how you like when you're 21, 25, you're supposed to run a certain way. I won't say you're supposed to. It's socially acceptable. But once you get to be a certain age, you're like, man, take your ass at home, bro. Don't you got a house to go to?
It does look a little ridiculous.
Is there somebody missing you right now? Like you out, like you shutting bars down. So I think a 55-year-old man with a wife that he loves and a home that he's happy in is a better version of a man than one who's not.
Yeah. Well, I think we all unanimously agree on that, but let me just give some statistics on that. So health and longevity. So it's reported that men have lower rates of heart disease, substance abuse, and premature death than unmarried men. So the unmarried man is dying off Okay, being married is keeping you living longer. Watch Jay go out propose to him because they obviously the women are like, did you call the doctor? Did you do this? I noticed something was wrong with you. I noticed that you're walking a little bit with a limp. I noticed that you was breathing funny when you were sleeping.
But every wife likes her husband.
Why no? Which goes to the other point where it says that men are more likely to remarry after divorce. When you think about all the things you see, it's always the men that are acting like marriage is the worst thing ever. The men, they're like, I don't need a piece of paper to show you how much I love you, that I'm committed to you. And the women are like, marry me, marry me, marry me. But it's the men who actually remarry after the divorce, but it is the women, 65 to 70% of women that are the ones that initiate the divorce.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
And the percentage is even higher among college-educated women. So
I got a theory on that, though.
And then after divorce, men often report greater loneliness and decline in social support. So the man married gets the respect, right? He gets the acknowledgement. He gets the you're mature. You took a wife. You've done the manly thing. But if you're older and you're not married, look at this fool up in the club. Get him up out of here. Look at grandpa. You know what I'm saying? Got to take a little blue pill trying to hang out with these young girls. Get him up out of here. And I think that's what's happening. Women, though, will more likely have financial hardships from divorce, especially when children are involved, which is probably what keeps women married a little longer.
Put a pin on
women
that
weren't
one.
working, that they would probably stay. Were they like, are they better at the for better or for the worse back in the day? Or were they just there because they're dependent?
Probably
They're dependent on each other. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was a really that no one believes in marriage and the sanctity of marriage has changed.
Your question, though?
I think they had to stay with that guy because what else were they gonna do?
But
And
you
now,
highlighted something with your figures, though. You said that initiate divorce far more than men. Could that also be because, and it's changing, but the family court, man, a lot of men will stay unhappy in a marriage because family court will fuck you up.
I just know that I was ready to walk away from it all, and I didn't know how it was gonna make it work.
Anecdotally speaking, I would say still, I mean, we're starting to see courts look at it a little different. Like I, as a man, couldn't take no alimony. I couldn't. I don't give a shit if I married Oprah. My toxic masculinity, I couldn't take no damn alimony from no woman. If we ain't together, I don't need shit from you.
I mean, I don't know.
Some men out here be like, hey, go get your money, king. Stand on business, king. Generally speaking, like when a woman passes before her husband and they've been married longer than 20 years, that man usually dies within 1 to 5 years because he's lost his friend.
Oh yeah, most of the men die faster than that. I think women usually live a little longer.
But when the husband dies first, the woman still lives
35,000 more years.
But generally, so I think there's something to be said that the notion that somehow one is more connected or loses themselves in the marriage or more, I think that's debatable. Because any man who's been in a fucked up marriage, any man who's had to sit in the driveway for 5 to 10 minutes to an hour before he's gone in the house that says, you know what, I'm only here because of, or I'm sticking this out because they're kids, or they feel like would feel like a failure. I know before I divorced, I felt like a failure going through a divorce because I felt like the one thing that I thought I could give my kids that I didn't have was a stable 2-parent home, whatever that meant.
Women have that same feeling. Women still feel like failures too. Because now we're tainted. We couldn't keep a husband. Now we've got a stain on our record that's far bigger than the stain on a man's record. Jay, what you think?
You guys bring interesting points to it, and what I can appreciate about this conversation is that, like, we're leaving no stone unturned, which, you know, you can always, you know, hang your hat on and look forward to. The collection of us is assembled to be able to dialogue and have discussions and debates about things. And it's important to us that there are multiple views and perspectives surfaced, because we know that people are not monolithic and there's no such thing as a one-minded person. We're all impacted and influenced by each other. And in today's society, what I think is lacking is the ability for people to actually sit and to have conversations and dialogues without becoming defensive or thinking that if something is said outside of their alignment that they have in their worldview, that somehow their other person is wrong.
Well, this has been a great conversation. And it did start with a simple question, like, has marriage changed or have the people changed? What we really proved is that there's really not one real answer, right? Marriage means a bunch of different things to different people based on their experiences, based on the things that we've all witnessed, how we've grown up, our expectations, even generations that we come from. So, do people still see it as the ultimate commitment? Whether people will still see it as a partnership. But regardless of where you land, like one thing really does seem clear is that the success of marriage always depends on the people that are in it. So we'll leave you with this question. If you could remove all the outside noise, the social media, the statistics, the other people's opinions and past experience, what would it really mean to you? Think about that, discuss it, argue about it in the comments if you need to. But I'm Lucretia alongside Jay, Dominique, Prometheus, and this has been The Cream Mix. We'll see you next time.